Hey everyone, thanks for learning to play games. My name is Lance, and in today's video, this is a little bit of a different video. This one, I am going to be talking about Mythic and the Mythic effect as it's been coined, as I did watch a couple of other videos that were put out from Ryan and Dave at Man vs. Meeple and Alex from Board Game Co. covering this situation with Mythic and pretty much the downfall of their last couple games and the aftermath of all of the backers basically losing their pledges, losing all of their money. And I know some of them are trying to pursue different means, but I wanted to kind of go into a little bit on my perspectives on this. And obviously it's another video on this, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to make this. And watching Man vs. Meeple's videos, which I'll have a link to their video and Board Game Co's in the comments down below, is I'm not going to go through all the nuances and all the different information on this. As those of you that are probably watching this are already familiar with this, and if you're not, they do an excellent job of explaining it, so I don't feel like I'm going to do much justice going into it anymore, other than the fact that Mythic is not going to be delivering Hell or Alistair. So that's that. And I wasn't sure, again, if I was going to make this until I watched the Man vs. Meeple video, as both Ryan and David kind of put out a question to their community as they wanted to hear from backers and what they're feeling and their experiences with this, or what they're, how they're handling it. And so I figured I would make this video, as I am a backer. I am a backer of both Hell and the other game, and I'm pretty deep in there. I think for Alistair, I went, I think I was about 500 or a little bit more, and I think Hell was comparable. I don't think that one was quite as much, but I didn't look, and it's been too long for me to remember. But either way, I think that, that'll put me about $900 to $1,000 that I've lost for between the two campaigns. And so I wanted to kind of share some of my feelings on that as a backer, and my feelings and my thought process and all that kind of stuff, and try to illuminate and shed some light on some of that. And again, I am not connected with any of these companies. I've never worked with Mythic. They've never given me games or anything like that. So I don't have any insight into any of that I can, give you any more information on that. I don't have any connections with Simon or Come On, or however you want to call them. I'm so old school, I still kind of call them Cool Mini or Not or whatnot. So, but anyways, these are just my opinions. These are my feelings. They're my thoughts on different things. And again, I am not connected. I don't have any insights, even as a content creator with these companies. So I unfortunately cannot provide you with any more information on this stuff. But I can commiserate with you, and I can kind of go into some of the experiences I've had. So first off, the Mythic effect, as it's kind of being coined. This is just the latest example of this, unfortunately. But again, looking at the overall scope of the situation, as some people have asked, is this going to affect Kickstarter? Is this going to affect the crowdfunding environment? Or is this going to jade people in backing these kind of games or taking risks on companies? And in my opinion, I really don't think so. I think it will have an impact. Of course, it's going to have an impact, but I think it'll be forgotten over time, or the effects will lessen. And I don't mean that in a cold or calloused way. What I mean by that is that this has happened before. There's been many situations for those of us that have been in crowdfunding for a long, long time. I started way back with Cool Mini or Not's very first Zombicide game, way back when crowdfunding was still very new to the board gaming industry, that it really kind of kicked off all of this stuff, and people saw that board games had a potential to actually do really well. So I've been a part of that, and unfortunately, I hate to admit this, but I have probably backed over 350 projects over the years since then, and probably 98%, 99% of those projects I've received. But there's always those outliers, the projects, and it seems like it kind of comes in waves with some of these things where projects will fail, the companies will go silent, things just fall apart. And over the years, there's been many examples of that. Another great example was Myth, with their company making promises and falling short with their budgets, and where they had that second Myth campaign that they weren't able to completely fulfill. I ended up getting the core expansions, but none of the stretch goals, none of the other products that I had purchased. And yet again, another company came in, purchased those rights, and as part of that agreement has made the promise that they are going to try to fulfill as much of that as they possibly can. They weren't able to produce everything, and supposedly most of that product is on the boats now. So those that backed that game way back in the day and have been in communication with that company might see some stuff, which is awesome, and that game will potentially have a second life, depending upon if people are willing to try it again. With Ulysses Spiegel, they're going to be making a new entry into that. I don't know if it's how they're doing it or whatnot. They really haven't released a lot of information about what's coming in the future, but that's another great example. There was the situation with the Evil Dead and Terminator. I was a backer of those as well. Though I did not buy the Evil Dead dice, though they were supposed to be made out of the cabin's wood, or the original cabin, the wood from it. I was tempted, but I didn't do that. So I didn't lose everything on that one. And Ninja Division with their games, and other companies that have come and gone with their games. So there's been many of these situations over the course and history of crowdfunding for those of us that have been around for a long time. And I guess each time this kind of comes up, it does provide us with a reminder that again, this is not a guarantee, that these projects are not 100%, that in the ideal world, I give you money, I get a game, is the understanding and the hope. But we also have to keep in mind that that's not a guarantee, that you are essentially, in a lot of situations, trying to help somebody realize their dream of creating a board game. And a lot of these companies, especially first-time companies and small companies, there's no set course in this. There is no schematic, there's no plan, there's no guideline that is going to walk a company from step A to the final product. So every single company is basically taking this voyage on their own, hopefully learning from other companies in the past, and being able, and the great thing about this community is that we do try to help each other out. But this is a new thing for every company. And so missteps happen, mistakes are made, over budgeting, all kinds of different situations arise throughout this project or any project that comes up. And I don't think that really changes all that much for companies that have been around for a long time. Yes, they have hopefully more funds to fall back on, as Mythic, if you take them for their word, said that they had more funds that they put into previous campaigns such as Darkest Dungeon and Siege 6 to try to compensate for that, even having to go to backers. And I backed both of those games as well and spent the extra money on those to get those products. And I was under the assumption, which ended up obviously proving wrong, that they were just going to continue doing that we were going to get Hell, that we were going to get Astaire, that we would have to pay more for it at the end of the day, which doesn't excuse what they did. At the end of the day, the blame falls completely on them. It was their responsibility as a company to honor their agreements, to use those funds wisely, and they didn't. For whatever reason, for whatever they did, I, again, don't know. I don't know their books. I don't know, what happened there, and what their feelings are on the other side of things. And we'll probably never know that. But again, looking at this from a backer, again, from the money that I've lost and that, I always look at this as a gamble, as a bet. I am not willing to put any more in that I'm willing to lose. And that is my situation with every project. Because again, no matter if it's CMON that has had 50 some odd titles that they've shipped, or if it's a first time company, you never know. You never know what's around the corner, again, with all these companies. And I think that's one of the missteps that Mythic might have taken, again, speculating, is that as a mid-level company, maybe even high-end, I don't know where they fall within that structure, that they've had multiple successful projects over the years. And so they had basically a schematic that they had set up, or a battle plan that they knew what needed to be done, what funds needed to be allocated, what kind of funds they needed to hold off to the side, and how to continue this machine of making board games. And unfortunately, when COVID happened, that shot that plan all to heck. And again, I understand that there are companies that were able to weather that storm, and there were also other companies that didn't weather that storm. And some of the companies, I think we will still see. There are certain companies that will end up going out of this industry because of the ramifications from those times. Even now, as we just saw with Mythic, these effects take time, and it depends on how dedicated these companies are to weathering this storm and trying to, at the end of the day, meet the agreement that they made with backers. But that's my biggest takeaway, I guess, from this situation is, again, it's not the first time that this has happened. It will not be the last time this has happened. I don't think that this is going to make a huge impact on crowdfunding overall. I think there will still be massive games being produced by certain companies, that we're going to continue to see some of these big titles, and that at the end of the day, it is up to us as backers to decide what to place our money in. Whether it's, again, and I don't want this to turn into, well, I only want to back big companies that have released many, many titles. Because again, that misses the point of Kickstarter or crowdfunding, is that we would have never had some of these games if it wasn't for crowdfunding and taking chances on first-time companies. I mean, looking back at a great example of that, in my opinion, was Kingdom Death. It's a $400 game. At the time, it was, I think, $100, $150 for a pledge. And back in those days, crowdfunding was very, very new for most of us. And there was nothing on the game compared to today, where we want a rule book and we want videos and we want to know everything about these games and how they work, and you want to see all the minis and everything else. That was a really interesting project in that there really was nothing known about the game, the mechanics, whether it was going to be good or not, which it turned out to be, extremely successful, and has done multiple Kickstarters since that have done extremely well. But again, that mindset and I don't want us to necessarily get away from that, because that was what allowed these companies to make these games that have impacted us in such a phenomenal way, and have brought new experiences and new mechanics and new things to the table, that if we divert from that and only go after the more sure bet, that we're going to miss out on all these other games that these companies are making, whether it's a first-time company or not. I mean, another great example of that was Oathsworn. Brand new company, never made a board game before, and made this massive, massive, massive game that turned out to be amazing. So I think that's the other big thing that I would say as a good takeaway from this. Again, don't be willing to bet more than you can lose. If you can, and again, no one likes to lose. No one wants to throw good money away because there's many, many other things, obviously, that we would like to or need to spend money on. And at the end of the day, this is a very expensive hobby, and it continues to become more expensive. When we started, it was $100. Now you're spending what you would spend on a PlayStation 5 console for one game. So I mean, it's perspective, and I came from my background was Warhammer as well. So I mean, I'm looking at, back in those days, that was the expensive thing where you're spending, $500, $600 on an army to play on the table. And now I'm spending, that easily on some of these big board games. And so some of it's perspective. And again, like I said, it's what you're willing to potentially gamble or willing to lose. And I guess if you go into it potentially with that mindset or understanding, it helps a little bit when situations like this happen. Because at the end of overall, it is still a very safe industry. Or crowdfunding, as a general note, will have delays. That happens, and that's almost to be expected at this point. It's very rare for a company to have a game ship as when they plan, because there's so many things that can go wrong between manufacturing and everything else. But for the most part, still high 90s% of the time, these games are developed, manufactured, and shipped to backers, and for the most part, usually have a great experience with them. There's an occasional dud, but for the most part, they're usually pretty good games. So that's my biggest thing, I guess, with this as a takeaway, is that, obviously this doesn't excuse, again, what Mythic or any of these other companies did. At the end of the day, they failed. And I don't think they will ever recover. Whether CMON comes into obviously coming in and buying some of the IPs, and I don't know what happens. The only things that really aren't defined so far is Darkest Dungeon and Siege 6, or whatever it's called. Whether those IPs will live on, I don't see Mythic coming back, period. They're never going to be trusted on crowdfunding again. It'd be very hard for them to produce pretty much anything else with these, and I would assume that the funds are gone, obviously. So they have no way of doing anything with these other than potentially selling off these final couple IPs if they haven't already, that we just haven't heard about. The other thing I think I just want to kind of touch base on real quick, though, and something that I would encourage people to go forward with, is that we've had a few situations now with some of these games, such as Evil Dead, or now with Myth and Ulysses Spiegel, and now with CMON and picking up these titles. These companies have their own reasons for doing this. I'm sure there's whatever agreements they've made, but as backers or as the community, if we continue to hammer on these companies that are willing to step into this stuff when they didn't necessarily have to, and again, their reasons are their own. What I would assume that they're financially, potentially hoping to gain from these situations, obviously, as companies. But either way, at the end of the day, they don't have to do some of these things where they're trying to honor some of these old pledges or being able to gift us with a core game and all that. And so all I guess that I would kind of remind people is that if we continue to tear these companies apart that are willing to take this risk, as the PR, I get, has got to be a nightmare for these companies. I cannot, just like Alex said in his video, it's hard to understand the rationale behind that, obviously, without being in that back room and hearing those conversations from the outside looking in. It seems like a very bad choice for a company to step in and try to, I guess, in a way, rescue these projects that have failed, because people are raw. People's emotions are raw. They're upset for losing the money that they lost, that they felt was that they were going to get a product for. And even though these companies are trying to provide some sort of product or gift for these different things, if we continue to go after or tear these companies down for even stepping into this area. They're not going to do it anymore. And at least in this situation, we are getting something. And I get the argument for those of us, again, like me, that backed these games at $500, where other backers only bought the core game at $100, and now we're both going to just get a core game. And that disparity there, and how I, as a higher backer, feel like I should get more. At the end of the day, I would get nothing if it wasn't for companies that came in and are going to provide something. So at least in this situation, I'm going to get something. It might not be what I originally backed. It might not even be a good game. But at the end of the day, I guess at least I'm getting something. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that I will get something out of this. And being that it's CMON, I have a pretty good feeling it's going to be good. And I would assume, and again, this is my speculation alone, that they will probably run their own campaign. They'll have their own stretch goals, and I will probably back those. I will get the core game, and then I will try to get the rest of the stuff. And we'll see what happens with that. I have good faith in them that these will be solid titles. But I guess, like I said, those are my thoughts. And I'd love to hear from you as well. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these. If you haven't had a chance to check out those other videos from Man vs. Meeple and Board Game Co., they do a better job, I guess, explaining some of this stuff. But again, that was the only reason I kind of wanted to make this video, was just to kind of chime in with that. Again, responding to Man vs. Meeple and their request to hear from backers. And I figured I would be able to provide a little bit of a different insight with that, with my both background as a backer, a super backer, and as a content creator, as I've been on both sides of this, so I have a little bit more insight into some of the goings on in the industry, and getting a little bit more of an understanding of this. Not much, but a little bit more. So those are my thoughts. And so I hope you found the video helpful and entertaining, or at least understanding my thought process a little bit more. I don't know if that'll make you mad, but I'm always open to starting conversation in the comments down below. All I ask is to keep it civil. Try not to be too critical. I'm happy to hear constructive criticism, but let's be friendly about this as well, because at the end of the day, it is about the community and us enjoying our hobby. And that's all this is. And in a world that focuses on digital and eyes on screens, this is one of our last kind of refuges that brings us together and puts us at a table, and it shares experiences. And those experiences are what we're going to remember. And I think that's the other big takeaway for me, is that it's not about the winning and the losing of games, whether you're playing cooperatively or competitively or whatever, is to remember that aspect of the game, is that in a year, in 6 months, you're not going to remember who won or lost the game. You're going to remember the experiences you had, the unique situations you had, the memorable moments with your friends and family that you've gathered together to take part in this adventure, this game, and this competition, whatever it is that you've chosen, in a face-to-face manner versus on a digital screen. And who knows how many other things are going to hold that for much longer. We're constantly evolving and making more technology to keep each other farther and farther away from face-to-face contact. So just my thoughts, just my opinions, and until next time, I'll see you later.